What do you guys think of the sausage? So this is where it's really fun to work with Brouwers, is that these guys grind all their own meat for burgers, and they do their own sausage, and they do a lot of other things here. And it's really fun for me because when you come to a place that's so equipped, and we can actually pull stuff off like this, because again, you can't just show up anywhere and say, okay, we're going to make a rabbit sausage. They're like, what? Huh? So this is where, for me, working with Brouwers is a real treat, and I really enjoy it too, because what we're able to do with the chef back there and the whole kitchen staff, and I'm just one person with two hands, so it's great to have their help. This next course is kind of interesting because, with the English taking over India and their empire at one point, it's really unique in how it's influenced their cuisine, and I think a tiki masala kind of needs to happen. So we took duck and we chopped it up and we marinated it overnight in Union Jack, as well as some Greek yogurt and some herbs and ginger and garam masala, and let that sit, and it's just super tender duck. Roasted that off, chopped it up, again even finer, and then put that into a kind of a coconut tomato curry with caramelized onions and shallots and leeks. And then we added in, just because, a little bit more UJ to kind of get that orange and a little bit of that bitterness. And then we did a hemp bale basmati rice with some lentils in it. And on the side is a mango and dried apricot chutney with actually made with UJ. And all these different flavors together with a little bit of fresh cilantro. I can't think of a better beer, but a brand new beer that I'm sure almost everybody, except for the select few, have tried a wonderful beer from Mr. Jim Crooks. So you guys are probably one of the first tests, right? Has this left the brewery, really? So you guys are really pretty lucky here tonight, because this is a beer that will be served tomorrow for Sourfest. But we'll all see you tomorrow too. So come on up here, Jim. And David too. He's going to talk. So here you go.
So let me just introduce this guy. We like every brewery, we got a history, and we started out in the barrel room that we rented from the vineyard, and we struggled for about 4 or 5 years as a brewery. But because we were making good local beers, we did okay. And what we ended up doing is we ended up buying a brewery that actually went out of business. And by the time we got there, the brewery had been out of business for about 90 days, and the brewery was sort of interesting. It had a bunch of fermenters that were full of beer. And when we arrived, there were literally 2 cats in the brewery, and literally they were cats. One of them was Matt Brindleson, who was fresh off the boat from Chicago, and the other was this guy who was he was feral. I don't know if you know he was completely wild. And I remember the first time I encountered Matt. Sort of piercing blue eyes. I knew exactly. I really understood Matt, but the other guy literally got about 2 inches from my nose and sort of said, who are you? What are you doing here? What are you going to do with my beer? And that was this guy here. And that was about 10, 11 years ago. And Jim is actually one of the huge reasons why our brewery actually has some balls. He runs our lab and literally comes to physical blows with people in the brewery on a daily basis if they're not behaving themselves. And we're a QC-driven brewery, and a lot of it has to do with this guy here. We call him Sour Jim because of that, but more importantly, he's put together a really interesting sour program that I'd like him to talk to you about in a moment.
I'm not from England. Just want to make that known right now. Wow, so you guys know Firestone as well as I do. It's a very clean product, very hop-driven product, non-pasteurized, 1 strain of yeast, this and that, very consistent. And I know it is the same as you guys. So why do we have this beer in front of us, I ask? And the question, I can answer that. this is from necessity of basically people asking me, why does Firestone not have a sour program? This happened a couple years ago. It's been mulled over my head very many times. Being a microbiologist from trade, I went to school, got very invested in brewing science and microbiology, knew what these things could do. These bacteria are amazing. These beers have been around for ages. If you guys don't know, this is probably one of the oldest beers produced on the planet because it's so easy. And when I say easy, I mean if you give these bacteria a sugar source and some alcohol, they will make this beer happen regardless if you want it or not. And in my world, this is not what we want. Because this means I don't have a job. If the beer tastes like this, it's over for me. So, I couldn't produce this in the brewery, and I couldn't tell anyone I was doing this. And 3 years ago, I basically took a couple kegs off the filter of double barrel ale and pulled them outside. And we had purchased this back warehouse where we were doing nothing with at the time. Now it's going to be full production, but at this time no one was walking back there. So in covert action, I put a couple barrels back there, and wine barrels from the region of the Firestone Walker Brewery's at, which is Paso Robles, and took some double barrel off the filter and filled these wine barrels with this product, and called upon a couple people that you probably have heard in the industry, one of them being Russian River Brewing Company, Vinny Coluzzo, and New Belgium Brewing Company, which my friend there's the Salazar Company, probably heard of them, props to them, and told them I wanted to start a sour program. And each of those people sent me their bacterias that they had been working on, and from those strains, I was able to inoculate double barrel ale in these wine barrels, and this has probably been going for about 3 years now. But what you're tasting is, the base beer is double barrel ale, which is amazing because a lot of these bacteria don't really like hoppy beer. Double barrel is not really a hoppy beer, it's about 30 IBU beer, but the bugs and Paso synergistically work together to create this beer. So what you're tasting is kind of its own concoction based on where we live in Paso Robles. The summers in Paso can go from anywhere between 30 Fahrenheit up to 100 degrees. I mean, 60-degree Fahrenheit swings is not uncommon in the summer months. And in the winter months, it's downright cold. So nothing happens in the barrels during the summer months. I mean, winter months, excuse me. So what happens is that you have this indigenous kind of product being produced from the ambient temperatures in the brewery. And what you're tasting in front of you is the byproduct of Paso Robles, very indigenous, and with the help of a couple beautiful friends of mine that have helped spontaneously make this happen. And the idea here is this is going to continue, but for you guys out there that are thinking that this beer is going to be available, do not count on it. Not for at least a year or two. But with the help of David Walker here, and the help of Matt Brynildson, who's definitely coming to grips with the idea that the sour thing is going to be happening, we're producing a new barrel room in Buellton, which is going to be temperature controlled, and the idea is to start spawning a sour program for Firestone Walker that will be available for the public within the next year or two. So, cheers to everybody, and I want to say thank you to Matt, thank you to Vern, for these are the two people that basically made this happen. I have to say that. Matt Bonney and Vern came down to Firestone Walker about a couple months ago, and I pulled this out. This is like the first time I've ever pulled this out, and those guys just fell in love with this beer. This is kind of the first showing of this, and both of them were like, yes, we want to make this beer part of our program, and they graciously allowed me to help make a beer for them coming up here for Bottle Works, which will be available in the next I think, year. So you can look for this beer that will be blended with a few other Barrel Select stuff that we're doing. But if you want to just check in with Matt and Vern, this is going to be coming out in the next year. It's going to be amazing. Something strictly made for them specifically. So cheers to you guys. Thank you for enjoying this beer, and I hope you all enjoy it.
Are we ready for Sunday supper? So this actually is kind of fun for me because I get to relive like childhood memories, and this is where I really begin to love my job a lot. My grandmother, when she would make Sunday leg of lamb, this totally brings back memories, and I kind of try to tweak some of those memories and that nostalgia. And you know, it's interesting when you look about the English feast and you look at those classic things, and this is just a leg of lamb that's been butterflied. It was marinated in garlic and shallots and Walker's Reserve, a little bit of thyme and bay leaf and rosemary. We did that for about 24 hours. Then we did a mushroom duxelle with oyster mushrooms, cremini mushrooms, and I can't remember the last mushroom in there, but 3 mushrooms, and then we sauteed those off with onions, shallots, and leeks. A little bit more Walker's Reserve to kind of get that nice earthiness, because there's a little bit of umami in that beer. And looking at pairing with this was interesting because there's a new black rye IPA on the market, and I just actually tried it at their new pub down in Paso, which is kind of neat to see their restaurant growing, and their presence in Paso just keep growing. And so this beer, I think the pairing was a real natural, because you get a little bit of astringency from the roast, but not very much, because there's also that rye in there, which kind of gets a little bit of creaminess, a little spiciness, and it balances it out. To go with that is a Yorkshire pudding, where we used duck fat instead of drippings from the cows, since we didn't have those. And we also did some DBA in the batter, so you get this nice, rich, but yet light and fluffy Yorkshire pudding. And then I couldn't think of a better beer, especially with the pairing, but Black Xanthus. This nice black hummingbird, little hints of coffee. So it's almost like a coffee red-eye gravy, if you will, that's going over this. And all said and done, I'm so excited for you guys to try it. So, love my job. So, with that, here's David Walker. He talks about the beer.
All right, he's bonkers. It's been confirmed. There's a little hope for him. Hey, before I talk about this, I want to raise a glass to my fellow brewdogs. We got Sean here from 21st Amendment. We've got Alain from Hair of the Dog, and we've got Brandon from Speakeasy. Thanks, guys, for showing up. I really appreciate it. Cheers. All right, so Wookie Jack. So I talked about the Russian dolls. Remember the Russian dolls, the Pale 31, the Union Jack, the Double Jack? Well, whoever the mother of the Russian dolls was, so had a moment with a milkman, because Wookie Jack's is sort of, it's like sort of part of it. It's sort of part of that whole deal, but it's nothing to do with anything that we do in terms of pale ales. But we're sort of, I mean, it's very much part of the family. It's a obviously it's an IPA. It's part of this whole sort of rye movement. And obviously you're picking up a little bit of the spice out of that. We're using this Cara rye. I don't know if you know about this, but it's dehusked, so it sort of loses a little bit of the bitterness that you get in the sort of that sort of spicy these spicy malts. Amarillo and Citra are the two sort of feuding hops as far as the dry hop's concerned, and Carafa that gives it that deep sort of dark color. But here it is. This is our Wookie Jack. Wookie, for those who are interested, Wookie actually is we anointed it based on Matt Brunelson's a huge fan of fish with a P, and if you follow fish with a P, you actually are a Wookiee, and so that's what it belongs to, an unfiltered, weird sort of rock and roller. So there it is, Wookie Jack. Salute.
So here's a shepherd's pie, but I didn't really want to do just any old shepherd's pie. I wanted it to be a little bit more unique, doing a combination of ostrich and duck. So this is my interspecies erotica. But with that, I wanted to play it up even a little bit more because Matt, Bonnie, and Bird, and a whole bunch of the PNC members were down at Firestone in January. And Sweets and David and Matt, they all set us up at this Basque restaurant. And the food was heavy, it was very flavorful, very good. But there was a soup that we had that was actually so thick that if you put a spoon in it, it would kind of be erect. It wouldn't fall over. And with that, Bonnie just burst out, oh, this is like a bowl of nap. And it was. Right at that point, we were about ready for a nap. So I couldn't think of a better way to title this next course, but then the cup of nap. So this is also, I think, from the flavor standpoint, you know, using the Walker's Reserve, a lot of great flavors, especially with that kind of English undertone. But again, I wanted to think about flavors and lightening it up a little bit. And you know, some of the flavors of the hops really mimic some of the spices that we use in the culinary world. And I think Double Jack really brings us out, that kind of orange tangerine undertones with those citrus elements. I just think it's brilliant. And the flavor and what this will do, I think, to the pairing, again, will be really nice because the dish itself is very heavy, but I try to lighten it up a little bit, but then with the beer, I think it'll really lighten the palate. And that's kind of the difference of using, you know, wine pairing versus beer pairing. This can actually really enhance it where I can't think of like a big cab or a Merlot with this. It'd just be way too heavy and put you over, where I think the Double Jack will almost save this beer or this course. So this is why I like beer cuisine, and here's David. Speaking of beer.
So yeah, talking about the PNC and Matt and Sean, you know, don't ever invite them to your house. You know, we invited them to our brewery, and like all these guys, you know, as a brewer, you're sort of a pillar of the local community. By the end of the 2 days, these guys, my reputation was shattered. These guys show up like full of vim and vigor with a big smile on their face. By the end of the 2 days, I hid for a day at least. I hid for a day, but I had romanced the vaporizer, and I'd actually done a somersault on an ATV off a dune, and I was literally like 3 degrees away from being a paraplegic tonight. And these guys, they arrive with like a sandstorm, and then just sort of leave with smiles on their faces, and leave us just sort of completely annihilated. So, moral of the story: don't invite them to your home. I will never do it again. All right, Double Jack. So, Double Jack. Okay, Russian dolls. Russian dolls. So this is Double Jack is actually the first runnings of the Union Jack, and is this is a beautiful beer. I mean, I think this is one of the finest things that's come out of our brewery. Once again, it has all the same sort of malt bill and the same sort of base hopping regime as the Pale 31 and the Union Jack, but this is all Amarillo. It's dry hop 3 times. Amarillo, Simcoe, and a little bit of Citra. And 9.5% ABV, 100 IBUs, and this is actually the beer that I put in front of the guy at Hook Norton. And bless his cotton socks, he looked at me and said, "You guys are 10 years ahead of us." So, Double Jack, enjoy it.
So now that we're actually done with our meat courses, it's time for some dessert, and I couldn't think of a better way to do a palate cleanser but to use some of the new sour beers from Brooks. Get in there, get in there! So, real quick, this next course is actually more Jim than it is me. All I do is I put some liquid nitrogen on it because, you know, I like to play with really cold things. So what's fun with liquid nitrogen is that it's basically 320 degrees below zero. And it freezes anything, including hard alcohol. And it makes the best sorbet in ice cream because there's no chance for ice crystals to form. It just freezes it solid. So this is basically the new Slovic, which I'm going to have Jim talk about. But this is also just a little simple syrup, and this way you'll kind of cleanse your palate from all the nice, rich things that we just had with that cup of nap, and lighten it up a little bit so we can do a few more courses and send you on your way at some point tonight. So there we go. Jim, Slovic, tell us, talk to us.
Teach us your secrets and everything later, Sean. This beer is called Slow Ambic, and the region we live in the Central Coast is the San Luis Obispo County. And as you guys probably already know, the history of lambic is that it is the oldest beer style on the planet because of the nature of, like I was discussing before, the bugs infecting the sugar liquid and making something that's drinkable with alcohol. And the idea behind this whole beer was to take something that we were making on a regular basis back in 2008, which is called Little Opal, which was the second runnings of a beer called Opal. Genius. Okay. So Little Opal was a 4.5% alcohol beer that became our summer beer. It's the premise before we made Solus, which you guys just had tonight, which is a 4.5 or 4.8% beer. Little Opal was brewed with Saison yeast, and if you guys have ever worked with Saison yeast, it's very finicky, so the beer actually was pitched with Saison yeast and fermented for 2 days and stopped. And we looked at that and said, uh-oh, this is a problem. And we went down to the cellar and prominently croissant the beer with pale ale fermenting wort to make it finish. So in brewers' terms, that's what you don't want to have happen is your yeast stop at about 8% alcohol, or 8% Play-Doh, and we finished it off with the pale ale and racked it into barrels, and then became Little Opal, which was one of our summer beers, and was able to take about 5 of these barrels aside and eventually hide them from everybody else in the brewery because everyone wanted every little last drop of this. And the premise to Little Opal was that this beer was going to be aged for about 3 or 4 years, giving it this beautiful Saison and Viognier barrel character. The Viognier barrels came from a local producer of wine in Paso, so we were able to get those in here, and then we were able to turn around and produce the Saison oaked aged beer called Little Opal, which is currently kind of coming out right now. It's been aged for 3 years. This beer that you're tasting tonight in this sorbet was used fruit called a lullaberry. A lullaberry is a mix of boysenberries and raspberries. It's kind of indigenous to this area, northwestern Washington, but grows indigenously in our county. So we used it, about 45 pounds per barrel, and then we were able to take one of our favorite sour producers' strains of bugs and infect the barrels. The barrels were then aged for 3 years. Like I said, there's amazing amounts of temperature change going on in the cellars down in Firestone Walker where this barrel's aged. And eventually what happened was we had this amazing fruit lambic that was used indigenously. The natural bugs and the natural temperature was concocted this beer that you are now tasting through ice cream, which I don't quite understand how that tastes, but will you give me some of that?
Who's ready for dessert? You guys having a good time? Got a cup and a half do any good? So this next course, as our 9th course, we took, for you guys who are familiar with the Ovaltine, we took the English equivalent, which is Horlicks, which is a sleepy time little treat. Basically for like a malted milk, you serve warm. And what we did with this is we mixed it in with some DBA, and you know, DBA to me is the perfect beer to cook with, because it has the oak flavor, the malt flavor. The hop isn't too aggressive, so it's really versatile. And that with the Horlick, we made a custard, and then we did a barley kind of infused pound cake. And the pound cake, you know, we did it a little bit different, you know, using the malt extract. So for all your home brewers out there, all the DME, as well as we put a few other malts in there, just to give a little extra texture and flavor. Put that in there, and then for all you guys who come to Brouwer's on a regular basis, you may have seen something called Underberg.
Yeah.
Underberg. So Bonnie and these guys are crazy with this stuff, and it does work. It's kind of fun. But this very high proof digestif is mixed with a little bit of orange juice, and we made a gelée with it that we layered in, and the cake itself was brushed with 15, and then we put a little bit of the gelée in there, and we're pairing it with Sticky Monkey. So Sticky Monkey was something that was in 15, so I thought it would be a very natural pairing. So there we go. So before you know it, we're talking beer again.
All right, we're talking beer again. Actually, we're talking English trifle. That sounds like an argument with a small Englishman, an English trifle. So, anyway. English trifle. You know, Horlicks, custard, DBA, malted pound cake, anniversary, they all belong in English trifle. All right, so those of you who, someone asked me, so why isn't your anniversary on the menu? And I'm sort of pleased it's not, actually, for a couple of reasons. Because it would overwhelm Sticky Monkey and Parabola. And Jim, come up here. I want you to help me out with Sticky Monkey. But our anniversary program is sort of a weird program in as much as so while Jim was sort of covertly trying to get some sour beer out of the brewery, Matt was covertly brewing all these weird big bourbon barrel aged, mainly barley wines, and giving them these beautiful names like Sticky Monkey and Bigfoot and Bravo and Parabola and Abacus and so forth. And these beers, you know, we stashed them away for years for our Christmas parties. And what we ended up doing is we ended up blending them together to create our anniversary beers. And in this case, obviously, the 15. And Sticky Monkey is one of those bit players, one of those role players in the 15. And it was a beer that was brewed as a component to help towards the blending. But Sticky Monkey's sort of got an interesting story, and I'll let Jim sort of outline that.
Thank you, David. Sticky Monkey, the name, so you guys know, comes from a flower on the central coast of California, down the coast. It's a beautiful orange flower that grows like a little bush, and if you ever touch it, it's very sticky. But the beer itself was concocted after Matt came back from Cancun on one of his excursions down there, I think with one of his early girlfriends. And shh, don't let that out of the bag. So he came back. About a week after Matt got back from Cancun, I was walking in his office and I saw this bag of sugar on his desk. And it had a bunch of Mexican, Spanish writing on it, which I didn't really read, but I saw the name of Zucar, and it was kind of out there for the taking, and I picked a couple pieces of this beautiful sugar out, and I tasted it, and I was like, holy man, this is an amazing flavor that you just don't get from our sugars in the United States. And immediately I was like, man, what are you doing with this? He's like, well, I just brought it back because I thought it tasted really good to me. I was making coffee with it and thought, you know, Paxton might like it. And it could be used for something or whether. And I was like, well, what about making a beer with this? You know, I mean, we could make one of these barrel-aged beers with this. And he's like, oh, whatever. Like, being mad, he's just kind of swamped with everything. And I took the bag away from him for about a week and started staring at it, and then eventually kind of deciphered the name of the company that was making this sugar. And through the internet, searched the sugar producer out and called him up. And lo and behold, I got in touch with a guy named Luis. And Luis was very happy to hear that we wanted to make beer with this sugar. And Luis said, no problem, I can send you a pallet of this sugar. And certainly you can have a pallet of this sugar, just send me a check of, you know, this much. And it was done on the phone, and we sent Luis a check, and I really never knew what was going on here. I wasn't sure if Luis was like he might have been the warehouse manager, he could have been just the dock manager someplace. I don't know where the sugar came from, but sure enough, like about a month later, this pallet of sugar showed up on the back doorstep of the brewery, and apparently, like, Luis got paid, and that was amazing. Maybe my little small transaction, Luis pocketed a couple $1,000s, and we got some sugar. But anyhow, the beer turned out amazing, and it had this amazing Mexican Torino sugar flavor, and we owe it to Matt Brynelson, first of all, for bringing the sugar back and spawning this, but also Luis on the dock of whatever place he was working to make this happen. And what you get is this Sticky Monkey, which is a barrel-aged, bourbon barrel-aged beer, made primarily with Mexican turbino sugar. And when you taste that beer, it's got this rich kind of caramel texture, but also kind of like a little twinge to it. Like the spices come from this sugar, which is not that burnt brown sugar taste that most of you guys know from C&H. It's Mexican. It's something to do with care and a kindness to the sugar, so not to burn it. And that was primarily the reason why I wanted to use this. And the rendition of Sticky Monkey is all about the care and quality used to make this beautiful brown sugar from Mexico. So, and all I'll do, I will turn the mic back over to Mr. Paxton, and he will tell us a little bit more about his process.
Thank you, Jim. This is what's fun too, is because the thing about that same care that they put into the beers, they put the same care into the food, because, you know, each course was designed around the beers, you know, to think about the beers in mind, to think about the bitterness or the maltiness or the hoppiness, and not from a bitter standpoint or astringent standpoint, but from a flavor standpoint. And just like with every course you've had tonight, the pairing, the cooking with, you know, it's not a gimmick, it's actually layered in there to give it extra flavor. If the beer wasn't in the dishes that you had tonight, they'd be very, very different. And this is, you know, big thanks to Firestone for making the beers, as well as, you know, you guys for supporting this whole endeavor that we do and we call beer cuisine. So, thanks guys.
I know.
Real quick, guys, we're winding it down, get your attention. So this next course, not too long ago, I was at a friend's house who's very, very British, and Ian made a figgy pudding, which Christmas pudding is also what it's known as. And I'd never really had that good of a version before, so as we all do, when we have something that's lackluster, we kind of like, okay, I can forget that and move on. Well, it came back and I learned a whole new lesson about just how good something can be. So, figgy pudding is kind of an interesting dish, and I'm sure David knows a lot more about it than I do, since I'm just a little white boy in the room. So, but what's fun with this dish is that we basically took dried cranberries, dried apricots, dried cherries, dried figs, dried dates, salterns, currants, and we soaked this in a combination of sucava or abacus, and we also added in a really nice bourbon with a lot of maple notes to it. a total of 5 cups of bourbon and 9 cups of Brouwer in the fruit. Let it sit overnight to really macerate, infuse, and then we mix this in with butter and flour and eggs, and we basically steamed this for about 7 hours yesterday. And now we're lighting it on fire with a little bit of whipped cream with it, and it's just this really unique pudding slash cake slash, not really a fruit cake, but it is fruit in it. And I couldn't think of anything better but the Velvet Merlin. I wear a Speedo, David Walker. Throw him under the bus there. But again, it was kind of fun because I tried with this beer again. And last night he didn't really like it, but tonight I think he might like it a little bit more.
Right, played with my beer. I don't know what that means. I don't wear the Speedo. He's the man who goes to Burning Man in a Speedo. With a dead deer in the back of his truck. No, I'm not joking. Marinated.
Vanilla bean.
Right, actually, you know, when you eat figgy pudding, you actually sing. Where I come from, you actually sing. So there's this sort of whole sort of, it's almost like a German thing, but it's an English thing, and you're supposed to demand your figgy pudding, and so it's like, we all want some figgy pudding, we all want some figgy pudding, we all want some figgy pudding, we're doing it right now, and you're supposed to slam your arm on the table. And anyway, so if you break into song, he should react. Yeah, no, that's exactly. Yeah, we're not very creative where I come from. So, anyway, so that's figgy pudding. Actually, the other good thing about figgy pudding, it usually has money in it. And I mentioned that to Sean last night, and there was no money in it. There's no money in your figgy pudding, so don't worry about it. But it's a beautiful thing, and it's the English Christmas pudding. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the beer with this. So this is Velvet Merlin, and Sean is buggered with the Velvet Merlin again. He's infused it with vanilla beans and nibbits and a bunch of other stuff that we did not approve. So whatever this beer tastes like, Sean is screwed with it. All right, so here's the difference between Merlin and Merkin. It's as clear as day. So Merlin is our English oatmeal stout. Nice, classic English, pure Fuggle hop. 500 pounds of oats per batch. I mean, a real classic English oatmeal stout. Merkin with a cup. That is Merlin that's basically thrown in bourbon barrels for a year. That's Merkin. All right. So if you drink Merlin, actually Merlin, it all swings right around. Merlin, we take a little tiny little bit of Merkin and throw it in the Merlin when we throw out the Merlin. So the Merkin, if you're now completely confused, the Merkin rolls out once a year. It's a component of our anniversary. It might show up in bottles next year. It's for some reason it's rude. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, Velvet Merkin is the barrel-aged version of Merlin. All right, so enjoy your sticky pudding, your Velvet Merlin with the Paxton nibbits. Okay.
Doesn't like dangerous things. I'm pretty impressed with
You guys like the figgy pudding? Yeah. How can you go wrong with something that good? So at this point in the evening, I'd like to thank everybody. It's perfect that Matt Bonney is walking this way because have your attention real quick, everybody. Attention.
Please leave now.
So again, a huge thanks to Vern. Huge thanks to this big mug sitting next to me, standing next to me.
Thank you.
And again, you know, happy Seattle Beer Week. I think it's great that you guys are supporting craft beer the way you guys are. We couldn't do it without you guys. Plus, too, it's pretty amazing when you stop and you think about the possibilities of where things are going, and the people in this room are making it happen. So I want to thank all you guys. Hey, Bill, can you grab the kitchen?
Yeah.
Have them come out. Let's get embarrass them a little bit. I know.
So there's a lot of you guys eat here a lot. Chef Robert has worked for me for a long time. We got Tony, we got Nate, we got Jordan, we got these guys week in, week out do a incredible job, and they make this whole thing so very effortless. Bob, raise your hand. He's trying to ask you. Raise your hand. There he is. Thank you very much. And, who thinks that the Brouwer staff and Sean Paxton can top this meal next year? Not a lot of enthusiasm. I'm throwing a gauntlet. So, but I want to thank Dave Walker, and I want to thank a lot of you guys. A few of you guys actually traveled pretty far to be here too. So, thank you for making the effort. That's it.
Also, I want to thank Bill. He was my go-to cake guy, and we have all these beautiful beers on tap, all ready to go, and big help. Thank you very much. Also, all the bartenders for pouring all this great beer. And for our last course, I couldn't think of anything better, but it's way thin. But of course, oh, and the waitstaff. Can we hear from the waitstaff? I couldn't think of any other way to end the meal except for it's way thin. So I was going to bring Bonnie a bucket, but I think he's okay. So we have a chocolate malt Tule cookie, which is experiencing a little of Seattle's humidity. So I do apologize for the humidity factor that I didn't factor in. But we have a nice little maltsters, which are like the British version of malt balls, cracked up on top of a little bit of chocolate ganache. So you might have to eat it off a little bit of paper, wax paper, so just FYI. But I do want to thank you guys. This has been paired with parabola. Just a nice little touch to finish off your evening. But again, thank you so much for coming out to Seattle Beer Week and Brouwer's, and now for something completely different.